Well, welcome in. So, a few weeks out from the 2026 Aotearoa Men's Wellbeing Summit, a gathering of like-minded, courageous, grounded men stepping into their highest potential. 3 days of brotherhood, connection into nature, speaking from the heart, opening the heart, coming back to the breath, inspiring speakers, and going within to vision up a new way of being and a new earth. We have men coming from all ages, from their 20s through to their 70s. This is the second gathering of its kind that we've done. One man had the pleasure of meeting for the first time at the 2025 Aotearoa Men's Wellbeing Summit is Jerry Beale, who I've got on this call, and I'm looking forward to a little bit of a conversation going deep with you, brother. It was a pleasure to meet you last year and have someone of experience in this men's work to come along with some of your brothers and a fellow elder, Flying Bear, Tony, the first time I've met him as well. And thank you for coming, first of all, last year, and thanks for being on this conversation, brother. And I look forward to having a little bit of reflection about what you experienced last year and maybe what you're hoping to experience again because you've signed up and bringing a few more Tane along this year. And I think I reached out to you. I found your Kauri Brotherhood that you run up in West Auckland. And so maybe you just might share a little bit about what you do there, first of all, and then how you, what's it, I sort of guess what drew you to come along to the Men's Summit last year, Jerry. And thank you for being on this call, brother.
Kia ora, Carl. I was part of forming what we call the Kauri Brotherhood because I recognize I need men's work. I've got a peculiar background growing up between parts of England and Northern Ireland, running pretty wild, no parents really present in my life, um, getting into a lot of trouble, probably being a pretty unpleasant young fella. Ending up in the Royal Marines as an officer for 10 years, going through some life-changing experiences. Some were good, some were not good, and I came away from that with a lot of memories, a lot of things I couldn't unsee, unremember, and carrying a lot of shame on a whole bunch of different things. We were part of some kinetic operations. People got hurt, people lost their lives. Yeah, and I buried that. I left the Corps and spent the next 5, 6 years burying all my feelings and trying to reinvent myself as somebody different. And it wasn't until I came to this country in the late 80s that I really became conscious of just what I was carrying and what I was denying. And quite by chance. I got invited to a men's retreat in the Coromandel, which was the Courage to be a Man retreat, which Saul Peterson pioneered. And then for the next 24, 25 years, I was a regular co-leader and participant. It became a big part of my life. I think in some ways I don't know if it saved my life. It certainly helped me begin to understand who I was, why I behaved the way I did. Yeah, and it really, really helped me grow and get over myself. But that sadly, the men's program no longer exists. The retreat center went through a feud amongst the trustees. Everything changed. We were kicked off the land. I did initiate into the Mankind Project, and I've done some other work with other groups, including a number of years mentoring the Rites of Passage Foundation. But quite simply, there was nothing near me that I could access that I felt drawn to. And so I talked to a dear friend of mine, Charlie Shorcon, who is also coming this year to the summit. We said, why don't we try and build it ourselves? And that is a responsibility. But we've been going now for over 2 years. We've got a fairly stable membership of between 15 and 25 men. We could take more, but we don't really have the capacity. We have a group that spans the age of mid 30 to 80. We have New Zealanders, Irish, Estonians, Indians, incredibly diverse collection of men. And what's refreshing actually is usually in West Auckland, there's a lot of men who have done something like essentially men or the Mankind Project, but only a couple of men have any experience of any form of men's work whatsoever. And I like to say we are making it up as we go along. Yeah, we've applied some principles that I've picked up. We have agreed some rituals and some protocols that move us into liminal sacred space when we meet. But I'm I'm really proud of what we, that group of men, have created, and it really has been a co-creation.
Mm.
Um, we have some beautiful elders in the group. We have some wonderfully raw, honest men. There's a lot of vulnerability being shown, and we've gone quite deep. We've done some work on the archetypes. We've done some work on what Robert Bly calls the wild man, that that part of the male psyche which is closest to the heart, where we show our vulnerability and our love and our awe. Um, we had a wonderful circle recently where we actually asked the question, does the relationship each of us had with our mother and father live in us still? And does it help or hinder? And that proved a really, really deep conversation. Um, so I do this because it helps me. It helps me heal. And I think I'm still healing. It's helped me be a better dad because I had a shitty father experience, pardon my language, and I am determined to be a better dad to my three kids. And they're growing now. They're out in the world studying and working, but we have a good relationship, and I'm proud of that. And I think the men's work I have done, the fine men like Tony Flying Bear, who was one of the men I met at Mana 28 years ago, has been a constant in my life. He's been an advisor, a friend, all kinds of good things. So this is why I do that. And I do not position myself as a leader. I'm just another middle-aged man blundering through life, trying to make sense of each day as it unfurls. How's
Beautiful.
that for an answer?
That's that's beautiful. I love how real and heart-led and authentic that answer was. And yeah, the space that you're holding in West Auckland, I honor that, brother. Yeah, honor the work you're doing there. And you talked about co-creation, and that's what we're into, right? Co co-creation, collaboration, and
What?
not so much of the competition that exists out there in the world.
Let me talk about that briefly, and what you've created. There was a time around about maybe a decade ago when I actually contacted all the leaders of essentially men, the Mankind Project. Rob Cope was leading Project Wildman. We unearthed half a dozen different men's groups around this country, including the South Island. And I spoke with Sol Peterson at Mana and basically planned a 3-day weekend where all these leaders came together because we were almost all following a similar syllabus, if you like, from a similar set of course books, Moore and Gillette, Robert Bly. And I really felt that we shouldn't be competing, that we should actually be supporting each other, not seeking to dilute what each program delivers, but to find overlaps and find ways we can support each other.
Mm.
And it was all looking good. Men actually even booked flights up, etc. And at the last minute, dear old Saul Peterson said, I don't feel comfortable. I don't know these men. And I said, that's the whole point of doing it. Basically, it all fell over. And I haven't tried to do it again. And one of the things that I absolutely loved about the inaugural Aotearoa Men's Wellbeing Summit was just how open every man I met there was. You know, that nobody was coming in saying, well, I'm an established leader of X or I'm at this point. You know, some of the men were deeply credentialed and deeply wise, but it was more than humility. There was an excitement and an openness and a shared acknowledgement that we have work to do that I felt every minute of those 3 days.
Mm.
And that really touched me. You know, I have done a range of deep immersions from ManKindProject's New Warrior Training, something else in Montana, and they've all been wonderfully deep and life-changing. But there was something different about the Men's Wellbeing Summit. It was more accessible, it was more inclusive, it was more welcoming, and in a beautifully soft way, it was actually more challenging because there was no reason to hide. There was no reason not to show my heart and share my feelings.
Mm. Beautiful. Thank you for those words, and thank you for the role you played in making last year the beautiful gathering that it was. And yeah, the comment you made about not knowing everyone, I must admit when I first went to talk to the circle there, I was like, well, there's 50 men. I don't
Yeah,
really know anyone here, apart from there was a few Tane had been on my retreat, but the lion's share of some pretty accomplished men there, and
yeah.
yeah, and so it takes courage sometimes to step in to that circle, but also knowing that everyone there comes with good intentions.
Well, I mean, my experience with other men's retreats or is that when you arrive at the venue, whether it's known or unknown, there's usually a bunch of men who are carrying the mana of some form of leadership, and
Mm,
there's often a bunch of men who are looking uncertain, anxious, a bit wary, or just a bit curious, and they're the ones who are there to receive the experience. You know, and even that begins a bit of a divide. Similarly, with the Rites of Passage Foundation, when Jim Horton was running it, you know, we'd assemble for the beginning of a tracks right, and you'd have the fairly confident home group leaders who were looking after the groups of young men. You had the older men like myself who were sort of the container, and we were pretty assured of ourselves. And you had a cohort of 20 or so young men between 14 and 19 looking everything from scared, wary, distrustful to resentful. And it took the 5 days for all of that to become something different.
mm.
But again, from the minute I arrived at the retreat center in Aputari, there was none of that. We were simply a bunch of men gathering with, I think, open minds and open hearts.
Any man that comes on the retreats I do every month is because many of the men that come to the monthly retreats I do stepping into this work for the first time. It might be in their 20s right through to their 70s,
Yeah,
and I've never sat around in a circle around a fire speaking to men that they've never met before from the heart, exposing their deepest, rawest self, things I've never talked about with other men.
yeah,
Uh, but what I say to them is don't make this the last time you do that. There are men's circles like this in every community around the
yeah,
country,
yeah,
and they are there. You just got to have a look around and I guess put it out to the universe, and they'll turn up in front of you. Uh, seek them out, and make this. It's like going to the gym, right? Or going to doing any form of training you might do regularly. You just got to do the repetitions, do the reps.
the world's in a very peculiar place. I won't say more, but as part of that, I think it is increasingly casting men into a place of confusion and
Mm,
ambiguity. You know, the last 2 or 3 centuries, I think, have encouraged men to fear each other and to compete with each other.
mm,
And that's caused enough pain and stress. At the same time, there has been a absolute disintegration of healthy masculine role models and what it means to be a man. We've had phrases like toxic masculinity, a whole bunch of stuff come up there. We've watched our sisters, we've watched the feminine work so hard to reclaim their agency and their sovereignty and their respect, and that's a work in progress too.
mm,
But even going back to when I was in the Royal Marines, um, there were very few men who had the right kind of self-awareness and knowing and confidence without it somehow being a projection or being brittle or a mask.
mm,
Those that did often were the older, more experienced NCOs who'd seen a lot, who and their role stretched from being the disciplinarian, being as scary as hell,
mm,
to actually being a father figure. And I was very struck. There was a man named Colour Sergeant Cuckoo. He was 6'5". He was terrifying as a drill sergeant. But 4 years later, in a different place, he held the hand of a young fella who'd taken him around to the kidneys and basically softly kept him alive through the night by talking to him. I think those are the few men who have done the work. Maybe it was done for them. It certainly wasn't done formally in that context. But I
mm,
think that's a man who has truly felt what it means to be a leader.
mm,
And again, we don't use the word elder much in our society, which I think is a tragedy. We've got no cultural pillars in westernized society. We've lost all the traditional gateways or rituals that helped us grow from, infant to child to teen to young adult, right up to becoming an elder. Whereas for centuries, communities, clans, tribes, whānau hosted traditional ceremonies and processes that let me know as a growing young man or a growing older man, now I'm stepping into a new chapter that has new responsibilities. It may have new challenges, but I cannot resist. I cannot turn around and walk backwards in my life.
mm,
You have none of that. So our boys and men often are growing up with parents, whether it's one parent or two or none. The parents are distracted. The parents have their own challenges, and today, particularly, I gather the age group of the Gen X 50 to 60s are the ones whose lives have not turned out the way they hoped. So they've got their minds full of their own issues. They often are the worst person to really understand what their son is going through. So again, we've lost that bridge. So we have millions and millions of what Philip Folsom calls cultural orphans out there trying to find their way without anybody to guide them, anybody to bounce things off, anybody to give them a slap down the ear if they make a mistake.
mm,
So, sorry, we are forcing our young men and boys to find their way in a deeply confusing, shifting world with no concept of I love the word Ubuntu. I am because we are because I am. This inseparability. I'm not separate from you, nor am I separate from the land or the air or the water or anything else. And I think that wound is one of the primary causes of where humanity is at right now. We have forgotten that we are part of something far greater.
mm.
We can't do it on our own. Excuse me. And then every country, every city, every town, every household is a microcosmic example of what happens if we're cut adrift.
Mm.
We're just lost. We're a dinghy with no rope and no oars. And men in that place, we don't flourish. We don't look after ourselves. We don't look after others. We don't make friends. How many men today are reporting they've got not one close friend?
Mm.
Don't know how to build equitable relationships with women. There are so many things we are making hard for ourselves by not gathering. And I love the phrase from Sacred Sons that brotherhood is the medicine. I know
Yes.
it is for me.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why we come back around the fire,
Yeah.
stand by the moana, cleanse in that, walk up the maunga together, see the sunrise, and gather in circle and share from the heart. And that's what we intend to do again in May. And yeah, anyone out there who hears the call and resonates with what Jerry is saying, I'd love to see you in the circle with the two of us. Yeah, and what's so this year's themes, Jerry,
Yeah.
human potential or the potential of man. There's some very inspiring men coming along to speak and share this year that are really pushing the boundaries of mindset, physical well-being, spiritual well-being. And then the other theme is stewardship, which I think speaks to the heart of what you've been talking about in depth so far. Stewardship of your own mind and body, but then into the land, the whenua, the whānau, the community, and thinking generations ahead. And that's essentially, I guess, what we're doing with the summit as well is there's a lot of issues out there in the world, and we could walk down Queen Street with placards about them, protest, get on social media and complain about things. But most change happens at ground level in our own homes, with our own bodies, with our own minds, and putting our own projects, innovative projects, to play in our own communities. And I guess that's a little bit about what the summit is about, is visioning up some what these projects might be and creating these ripples. And it's been awesome to see a lot of collaboration ripple out from last year's event. Men talking to men, some collaborations happening. Some of the speakers last year being invited to come and speak to um, in workplaces and organizations of the leaders that came along last year. Tell me about some ripples that might have happened in your world as a result of the summit, and also what you're looking forward to with those two themes this year.
Well, I mean, I immediately I connected quite closely with Rob Makaraka. We stay in touch. I just have such respect for not just who he is, but what he does and why. I've also connected with Jamal Parata. I'm actually launching a business. I've invited him to be a part of that, which he's accepted, which is exciting. We're getting it off the ground.
Mm.
Um, and I have very, very fond memories, of all the other men. I am following up on Arne Rubinstein's Rites of Passage, and again, I intend to go across there and do one of his trainings when the timing is right. I've also connected with Tiaki Coates and what they're doing in Raglan. I haven't been down there yet, but at some point I will.
Mm.
Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, and the ripples really were. I came away from that going, "Wow, that was deeper than the Mana Courage to Be a Man 3-day retreats or the ManKindProject retreats, or it really something in the alchemy of what happened on those 3 days really touched me, and I came away feeling hopeful and inspired. Um, I I don't like aging, but I am being nudged not so gently into taking on a role of responsibility and leadership.
Mm,
It definitely helped me with that. You know, particularly, I mean, stewardship is huge. I've spent time with the First Nation people in Montana, North America, and I do a fair bit of work with different iwi here. And I love how guardianship of what the creator has done, guardianship of Papatūānuku, guardianship of the stories and the threads that have got us where we are is inherent to those people. And again, it goes back to the wound of separability that you know us Westerners have conveniently forgotten that. I mean, there are those who have not, and I adore and admire those people, but I think we have a long way back to refine ourselves and our place in. I love the phrase that Amanda Scott, the podcast, uses to find our place in the web of life. You know, the
mm,
web of life interlaces everything, and we are part of the web of life. And there's a saying from the Kogi Indians in Colombia where if somebody says to them, "What is the purpose of human life?" Their response is, "The purpose of human life is to care for all living things, and there is life in everything."
mm,
It's so simple, and it's so humble, and it's so profound. I think that to me is certainly for me, that's the foundation of stewardship.
mm,
You know, it goes way beyond. Yes, sure, I love my kids and my partner and my dog. Sure, I own stuff. But every day I take my first breath, I have a responsibility.
mm,
Um, and I'm quite mouthy about that in circles, you know, around political decisions and the consequence of looking short term. I think the traits of eldership center on having wider vision, having a deeper sense of responsibility, as you said, you know, 7, 20 years ahead, and all the lives that are affected by the decisions that we make, by having that sense of compassion and not being selective and being perpetually open to learning, you
mm,
know. Um, and I was lucky to spend a bit of time working with Stephen Jenkinson in Canada. If you know him, he's an author, activist, and writer a couple of years ago, and we still stay in touch on what would it take to restore eldership to our society. And something he said, I feel strongly, we cannot tell our elders they are elders because I haven't been matured through my life by my community. Whereas traditionally, one's entire life is a journey through, again, those gateways and rituals and passages to prepare me for taking on that mental responsibility. We don't have that. So Stephen's response, and I'll read the quote. The greatest elderhood skill is not the skill of knowing how to be an elder. It is the skill of knowing how to have elders in your midst.
mm.
Start by preparing the place for them. And I love that,
Beautiful.
you know, and I I am very passionate about finding ways to reignite the purpose and energy and passion of people that are getting past the age of 50 because we are being conditioned to believe at that time of our life our usefulness is running out,
Mm,
and nothing could be further from the truth. Mentally, our processes, our brain is an incredible self-repairing, self-refining mechanism. And up until mid late 60s, we're actually becoming more mentally acuitive, not less. We're better at making decisions. We're better at balancing decisiveness with compassion by balancing consequence with need.
mm.
So I think we have a large cultural turnaround to accomplish.
And we need to keep our elders here on this earth as well. And I guess that's one of the motivations for this work for me is losing my dad in his early 60s. So many times I'd dearly love to have that wisdom around and it's not here. And we lose men in this country way too early. Lots of
Yeah.
things. Stress,
Yeah.
diet, alcohol. Um,
And lack of purpose.
yeah.
It's been proven that having a vibrant purpose actually adds years to your life. And I've met men, I actually worked with a man a long time ago who had sold the business he spent 40 years building and was
Mm,
sitting on his ass at home. Literally, he said, I'm dying from the inside out. I've got nothing to do.
mm.
So I
And
think
and stepping into this work is purpose. Purpose
absolutely it's
purpose doesn't have to be a salaried job, right? Purpose can be sitting in a circle of men and as an
yeah,
elder, bringing the next generation through, right?
absolutely. I mean, that's still a journey of learning that I'm engaged on.
Mm.
Um, I was lucky enough to be mentored by a man named Mac McCartney in the UK, who I still talk to, and he said something. An elder is one who has removed all ambiguity from their life. That sounds huge. It's enticing, but it sounds huge.
Yeah, yeah. Are you there?
I am there. No, sorry, I'm not at that point. Oh my God, no. I I I am doing some work with some very fine people, including Philip Folsom in the States,
Mm.
around what that requires, and helping to shape a plan for the next chapter of my life.
Yeah, I let you answer that. From my perspective, you're there.
And I thank you for that, and I squirm. I still have so many questions, and partly I like that. I love being as curious as a young boy. I think that's really important to nurture my curiosity,
Mm.
and I don't ever want to lose that. I have a horror of becoming, crystalline and just freezing. I've met people who have got older, and they just stop living at 55 or 60 or 65 or 70. They've got their house. They don't look beyond, whereas I
Mm.
cannot resist doing that.
Mm.
You know,
Some of the wisest elders, including Papa Junior, who was came and opened the space last year, wise elder. They've still got that cheeky little boy in them.
oh, sadly she's passed now, but Rob knows his auntie Rose Perry.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
did some work with Tuhoi some years ago, and I didn't meet her, but she was referred to me, and I watched some of her videos, and God, she had such mischief and such infectious humor, but it was carried with the force of a hurricane. She
Beautiful.
filled the entire hall with her spirit and her love. And I think a sense of it's not all so serious.
Mm. Mm.
And I think for me, learning to laugh at my own absurdity is medicine as well.
Beautiful. I think one of the beautiful things about last year and having someone like Anna that was there for the first event, helping us to put the structure around it,
Yeah.
was recognizing the elders, simple things that we can instill back into the day to day, like when we go to eat our kai, the elders eat first, the young ones eat last.
And I think one of the important roles of elders in any context is to be part of creating what I call the basket of belonging.
Mm.
So many people in the world today have nowhere to belong, and it creates pain. I think men particularly, once we go past the stage of playing for footy clubs or whatever, we're just cast adrift and we don't make our own friendships. Um, Belonging feeds a deeply important need in our psyche. And again, something else that I learned from Stephen Jenkinson, which he said a while ago, um, we think to belong is to be part of, but actually in the old English language, and he's quite a linguistic scholar, the prefix be actually intensifies the word. So he sees belonging means something closer to the deepening of longing.
Mm.
And I really, really resonate with that. To belong is not just not being alone, it's having both responsibilities and having comfort. It's being surrounded by safety, but also by challenge. And the role of elders, I think, is to know when to challenge and
Mm.
when to comfort.
Mm.
And I think I definitely felt a very strong spirit of belonging at last year's summit.
Awesome.
It's something that we talk about a lot in the Kauri Brotherhood. You don't just belong. Belonging is an active verb, it's a state. In order to belong, I had to fulfill certain responsibilities. That there's at the outside, there's the common moral compass, which currently is being devalued across the world, around the lack of democracy, the attack on human rights, and everything else. To be part of that container of belonging is to fulfill a role with responsibilities, with opportunities, and it helps us grow.
Mm. I had a You talked there about the challenge, the elders putting the widow down, the challenge. And I had an interesting conversation with a young Tane in our extended family the other day, and he said, Carl, the retreats you do, why are they just men? Why don't you do men not get the same sort of healing if it was men and women together? And that opened up a whole layer of why we do this work as men and solely as men, and the fact men and women are wired differently. But I'd like to invite you as an elder to speak to that and why we gather as men, what makes men and women different, and why do we need the presence of elders there to bring
Okay.
the next generation through?
I'm careful with the phrase to be a better man because I think in the current times we all need to learn to be better humans. And I love Robert McFarlane's challenge in the UK to learn to become better ancestors. But I think part of that, certainly for me, has been to go on a journey of exploring and understanding what it means to be a man. And a vast amount of what I have discovered and learned has come through the company of other men. I think there's no doubt that part of the healing of the world needs to be a coming together of men and women. I'm using the phrase, I guess, in its widest sense. But I think in order to do that, we need to do our own work first to make sure that we're ready for that. A lovely metaphor. I attended a retreat with Jamie Howell in Golden Bay a couple of years ago, um, focusing on the work of Joanna Macy, the ecologist and environmentalist, and also Bill Plotkin. And there was about 38 of us there, aged from 20 up to 80, really well held retreat. But on one night, we set up and planned a joint circle of the men and the women, on different sides of the wonderful pentacle, this beautiful big tent down there, which has got a circle of straw bales and a big fire in the middle and an altar. It's a very sacred space. And that was set up where the men went to one corner of the land at 1 o'clock, women went to a different corner. And we were roughly equally split of 15, 16 of each. And we had to explore amongst ourselves in a well-held way. Were we in the right place emotionally to sit with the women? And they did the same for themselves. And both groups said they were ready. And so we met at 7 o'clock and had a wonderful four, I don't know how long it was, circle where we asked hard questions of each other. but
Mm,
those questions were asked with respect and honesty and without judgment. Again, using protocols like the talking stick, etc. And again, it's a very sacred space for that. But that really brought home to me, one, I think the need to find a way to build a bridge between men and women so
mm,
we can work together, but also how important it is for us men to do the work on ourselves first. So we're not carrying the wrong kind of energy, the wrong kind of grievance, the wrong misunderstanding. And I maybe it's partly a maturing of attitudes, but also I think it's a coming to terms with the reality of who I am as a man
mm,
and being real about that.
mm,
You know, one of the amazing questions that came back from the women was, when I get angry, why do men evade or deny or mansplain or run away? Why can't you just stand in the fire of my anger? It's not always about you. I just want you to be you, and
mm.
so you can receive this. And I think,
Witness it,
yeah,
stay put,
yeah,
be in the fire, come through the fire, like the alchemy you're talking about.
yeah.
Alchemize it.
Readying myself, knowing enough about myself, not being triggered,
Mm,
not letting my insecurities come to the fore, not letting, pardon me, my shit get in the way of a really, really important, powerful Kōrero.
mm,
So I think I'm getting to the point where I think we men must keep doing our work, just as many women are doing their work. And when we come together in the right frame, it is truly world changing. And I'm seeing that in the US with Sacred Sons and their mixed events. The reports I hear is that beyond my imagining of I never thought I could talk this way to a woman or to a man and feel that close and feel there was so little stuff between us.
mm,
But that's just the beginning. I think it's a very, very big task. And she's something that the Kauri Brotherhood is looking at doing. One of our ambitions is to give back, is to be of service. And we are currently negotiating with some women to host a trial men's and women's circle.
mm. Beautiful.
It will be with women who have experience of circle work on their own context, and we'll pick our men very carefully. But it's just to see, is this possible? How can it work? And where could it go?
Mm.
Does that answer your question?
Surely does. Surely does. And I guess part of my answer to that young man was women are natural collaborators and they're drawn naturally into talking from the heart with other women and they've been doing it all the time.
Yeah.
And men probably err towards competition and clamming up and keeping things within. So that's why we need to go and do that work with men, get ourselves in the right place so that we can, once we come together, like you're saying, in circle with women, we can hold that space appropriately. And
Yeah.
the more I do this work with other men and retreats and like the summit and working one on one with men, it
Yeah.
enables me as well to, in my own relationship, when things do arise, like you're saying, not to be triggered and just to hold that space for my wahine as well.
And I've discovered having some understanding of the archetypal energies that run through us. You know, not every man has the same degree of sovereign, magician, warrior, lover energy. Some of us,
Mm.
most of us tend to sort of gravitate towards a couple of those, but just knowing what those energies represent have helped me understand my own tantrums and my own feelings and my own reasons for withdrawing, you know? And
Mm.
also showing me where I need to do some growth,
Mm.
where I've got a space to fill.
Beautiful, brother. Well, I love how you've touched on the many seasons of Jerry.
Oh,
I just did a little bit of research before coming on this call, and I knew you'd had a bit of a background in the military, as you alluded to, but I also see not many men step from military into the world of
I
advertising, such and
know.
such, George Patterson Bates. Yeah. And
And I never told anybody um, in any of my agency roles in the UK, then here, then the US, and then Australia about my past. I think I carried shame.
mm,
I'd left it behind. I mean, I've still there's a hill. I've got the grid reference saved. There's a hill in Wales where I have buried a box with ID cards and campaign medals and various other things as my way of putting that part of my life to bed.
mm.
Perhaps one day I'll go and dig it up. I don't know. But yeah, you're right. And it was a very unexpected career move.
Goes to show that that is what we're supposed to do as men as well, right? We're supposed to move. We're not supposed to be on this linear path doing the same thing all of our life. That's how we grow as men.
Absolutely. I get bored way too fast anyway.
Yeah, yeah. And part of that is coming full circle, like gathering last year in a pottery, and
Yeah.
then we're about to come back again. And
Yeah.
it'll be interesting catching up with the other men and seeing what has shifted, what has stayed the same, and what has grown, what has been shed. Part of growing is also being able to have some endings, letting things go, and that's part of the alchemy that we're talking about, right?
Yeah, I got challenged recently. One of my peculiar quirks is I don't like leaving things unfinished. So I'm
Mm.
often, working at midnight still. And I
Yeah,
got challenged by somebody recently around just let it be unfinished half a day. Can you do that? And I really wrestle with that, but at a different context. But yeah, I am so looking forward to coming down again, Carl, and to seeing some men again and to meeting some new men. I think and just letting it unfold around me.
beautiful, brother. It's a little bit like we had a little prayer or karakia before we started this call, and I talked about letting go of the quest for perfection. Um,
Yeah.
and but we'll make sure all our ducks are in a row for the summit, and I'm looking forward to, like you're saying, that alchemy of the summit, which is the many layers that alchemize and help all these men like yourself, myself, the other Tane coming, that a lot of us hold space for other men, and so it's a chance for us to come back into nature, into brotherhood, and alchemize any density that might still be there and recharge, refresh,
Yeah.
recalibrate using nature. Um, this is not a hui in a flash hotel in the middle of the city. We hold the summit out in nature because, like we're talking about, stewardship is all about how we look after this earth. So, and the earth looks after us. And so, by having these conversations, nature is witnessing it, and we're anchoring some of these intentions into the earth,
Yeah.
and the earth is listening as we're having these conversations. Not so much when you're having these conversations in concrete walls in the city. So don't underestimate the power of having these conversations out in nature, and nature helping us as we go ahead for the year as well. Looking forward to the clean kai, getting in the moana, the brothers coming together for the deep conversations, the walks, the swims, the pooty, sitting around the fire, the music.
Yeah.
Yeah, the music, the waiata. Some very
Yes.
talented brothers coming along, and the stories, the storytelling. And thanks for sharing your stories and your wisdom today, Jerry. And I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks' time, 14th to 16th of May.
I'll be
Thank you,
there,
brother.
Carl. Alrighty. Go
Thank
well.
you. New Zealand men are at the wrong end of most health statistics. We've created a wellbeing event especially for the wild hearts of men. Connection, brotherhood, clean eating, moving in nature, holding each other to account. If you're doing it tough and you feel like you're in the trenches, this is an opportunity to find some elevation, answers, and purpose. The Aotearoa Men's Wellbeing Summit is about walking the walk, embodying mental and physical wellbeing. 14 to 16 May 2026, beautiful Aotearoa, Coromandel. Rub shoulders with men at the forefront of creating positive change in Aotearoa. Come on your own or bring your team. Book your tickets at www.theprovider.co.nz. See you there.